My wife put me on speaker and said, "It's over," to make her rich friends laugh. I just replied, "Okay, I understand," and hung up. The next morning, her father called her, screaming hysterically, "The house! Dear God, what did you just let him do to the house?" I was standing in the frozen food aisle of a Costco in Tempe, Arizona, holding a box of chicken wings I didn't really want, when my wife put me on speaker and ended our marriage for entertainment. The phone had buzzed in my pocket, Emily's name lighting up the screen with that photo I'd taken of her laughing at our wedding reception, head thrown back, joy radiating from every pixel. I remember thinking how strange it was that we still kept those photos as our contact images, like archaeological artifacts from a civilization that no longer existed. "Hey, and I said, tucking the phone between my shoulder and ear, still holding the chicken. "What's up?" There was a burst of laughter in the background, high champagne bubble laughter that immediately told me where she was. The country club, her friends, the ones whose names all seemed to end in vowels and whose husbands all seemed to have inherited something substantial. "David," she said, and her voice had that particular brightness to it, that performance quality I'd come to recognize over the past year. "David, we need to talk." "Okay," I said slowly, setting the chicken wings back in the freezer case. Something in her tone made my stomach drop. "Are you all right?" More laughter. Closer this time. And then I heard it. The slightly hollow quality of speakerphone. That particular acoustic signature that tells you your private conversation has just become a public performance. "I'm fine," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice, the cruel one, the one I'd only started seeing in the last 18 months, ever since her father's commercial real estate empire had really taken off and she'd started spending more time at the club with the kind of women who measured their worth in carat weight and square footage. "I'm better than fine, actually. I've been thinking and God, how do I say this?" Someone giggled in the background. A voice I recognized. Brittany, probably, or maybe Sophia. They all had that same vocal fry, that same inflection pattern they'd probably learned from the same reality TV shows. "Just say it, Em," a voice called out. Definitely Brittany. "Okay, okay." Emily took an audible breath, the kind actresses take before delivering their Oscar speech. "David, it's over. We're done. I want a divorce." The fluorescent lights of the Costco hummed above me. Somewhere behind me, a child was crying for their mother. A cart squeaked past. Life continued happening around me while mine quietly detonated. "Em," I started. "Don't." She cut me off, and her voice had shifted into something harder now, more confident. She was playing to her audience. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You know it hasn't been working. You know you can't give me the life I deserve." The life she deserved. That phrase had become her favorite over the past year. Usually, it was preceded by friends' vacation photos to Santorini or someone's husband buying them a Mercedes for their birthday. "Can we talk about this in person?" I asked quietly. My hand had found the edge of the freezer case, and I was gripping it hard enough that my fingers were starting to go numb. "Can you come home so we can—" "Home?" She laughed, and it wasn't the laugh from our wedding photo. This was something else entirely, something that had sharp edges. "David, let's be honest. That rental house in Scottsdale isn't really a home, is it? It's a placeholder. It's what people settle for when they can't afford what they actually want." More laughter from her friends. Someone said something I couldn't quite catch, and Emily giggled. Actually giggled. "Emily," I said, and I could hear my own voice going flat, going careful. "We bought that house together. We chose it together." "You chose it," she corrected. "I compromised. There's a difference." "But that's the thing, David. I'm tired of compromising. I'm tired of pretending that your little accounting job and your—" She paused, searching for the word. "Your sensible lifestyle is enough. It's not. It never was." An older woman pushed her cart past me, glanced at my face, and quickly looked away. I wondered what she saw there. "I thought you loved that house," I said quietly. "You picked out the tile for the kitchen. You spent 3 weeks finding the right paint color for the bedroom." "I was making the best of a bad situation." And her voice had gone cold now, clinical. "Look, David, let me be clear. You're a nice guy, you're stable, you're adequate. But adequate isn't enough anymore. My father's business is taking off. My friends are living actual lives. And I'm stuck in a 2,400 square foot rental with a man who thinks a big purchase is a new grill. Someone in the background said, "Ooh, drag him, Em." I closed my eyes, opened them. The Costco was still there. The world was still there. My marriage was ending in a frozen food aisle, while a dozen strangers shopped for bulk toilet paper and rotisserie chickens. "So this is it?" I asked. "You're just calling me at 2 in the afternoon to tell me it's over?" "I'm calling you to tell you the truth," she said, "which is more than you've ever done for me." That stopped me. "What does that mean?" "It means you've been lying to me since the beginning," she said, and there was something triumphant in her voice now, something victorious. "Pretending you could give me the life I wanted, letting me think you had ambition. But you don't, do you, David? You're perfectly content being mediocre, and I refuse to be mediocre with you." The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't feel the way you think it will. In movies, people shout, they throw things, they rage and weep and make grand gestures. But in real life, in a Costco in Tempe at 2:17 on a Tuesday afternoon, betrayal feels like Novocaine. Like your whole body has suddenly been wrapped in that peculiar numbness they give you before they pull the tooth. "Okay," I said. There was a pause. "Okay? Okay, I understand," I said quietly. "If that's what you want, then okay." I could hear confused murmuring in the background. This wasn't the script they'd expected. I was supposed to beg, to plead, to give them a performance they could dissect over their second bottle of Whispering Angel. "That's it," Emily said, and there was something like disappointment in her voice. "You're not going to fight for us?" "Would it matter?" I asked. "You've clearly already decided. You've got your friends there. You're at the club. This isn't a conversation, Emily. It's a performance. And I'm not going to give you the encore you're looking for." Silence. Real silence this time. Not the anticipatory kind. "You know what your problem is, David?" she said finally, and her voice had gone sharp. "You don't feel anything. You're just empty. This is why we're not working. You don't fight. You don't feel. You just exist." I looked down at my hand gripping the freezer case. My knuckles were white. My wedding ring caught the light. Titanium. Simple. The one we'd picked out together at a small jeweler in Sedona because Emily had said she wanted something authentic and meaningful instead of something flashy. That felt like a very long time ago. "If that's what you think," I said quietly, "then maybe you're right. Maybe this is for the best." "Jesus Christ," she muttered. And then, louder, for her audience, "See? This is what I've been dealing with. Zero emotion, zero passion. It's like being married to a robot." Someone laughed. Someone else said something supportive, something I couldn't quite make out. "I'll have my lawyer contact you," Emily said, all business now. "We can sort out the details. You can stay in the house until the lease is up, obviously. I'll be staying at my parents' estate." The estate, of course. The 8,000 square foot Mediterranean-style mansion in Paradise Valley that her father had bought 2 years ago, complete with a tennis court and a guest house, larger than most people's actual houses. "Understood," I said. "David," she started, and for just a second, I heard something else in her voice. Something that might have been doubt or regret, or just the muscle memory of 4 years of marriage. "I hope you're happy, Emily," I said, and I meant it. Not because I was being magnanimous or taking the high road, but because I genuinely hoped she would be. Because the alternative, that she'd just detonated our lives together for nothing, for a performance, for the approval of people who would drop her the second she stopped being entertaining, was too sad to contemplate. "I will be," she said firmly. "Once I'm finally free, then I guess we both get what we want," I said. I hung up. The phone felt very heavy in my hand. Around me, Costco continued its eternal rotation. Mothers with overfilled carts, elderly couples arguing about which cereal was the better value, employees in red vests restocking shelves with the mechanical efficiency of people who'd done the same motion 10,000 times before. My marriage had just ended. My wife had humiliated me on speakerphone for sport. And I was standing in the frozen food aisle with no chicken wings and no idea what happened next. I put my phone in my pocket. I left my cart, which contained dish soap, paper towels, and a bag of coffee I now realized I wouldn't need because Emily always complained my coffee was too strong, right there in the aisle. I walked out through the massive warehouse, past the food court where families ate $1.50s hot dogs like they weren't living through a minor apocalypse, past the membership desk where someone was arguing about a refund, through the automatic doors into the Phoenix heat that hit like walking into a hairdryer set to hell. My car was parked in the back row, where I always parked it because I didn't mind the walk, and it was easier than fighting for a close spot. It was a 2019 Honda Accord, reliable, efficient, sensible. The kind of car that said everything Emily apparently hated about me. I sat in the driver's seat. I put my hands on the steering wheel. I looked at my wedding ring, and I felt nothing. Not because I was empty, the way Emily had said, but because somewhere in the past 18 months, as I'd watched my wife slowly transform into someone I didn't recognize, as I'd sat through dinners where she'd compared me unfavorably to her friends' husbands, as I'd endured her increasingly frequent comments about my lack of ambition and her disappointment in our mediocre life, I'd already done my grieving. The marriage had died a long time ago. This was just the burial. I took out my phone and opened my contacts, scrolled past Emily's name, found the one I needed. He answered on the second ring. "David," Robert Chen said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Robert had been my roommate at ASU, my best man at my wedding, and, though Emily had never known this, my attorney for the past 3 years. "Please tell me you're calling to say you're finally ready." "She just called me," I said. "Put me on speaker at the country club. Made it a performance for her friends. Said she wants a divorce." "Jesus," Robert breathed. "Are you okay?" "Define okay," I said. "But yeah, I'm ready. Let's do it." "You're sure?" he asked. "Because once we start this, David, there's no going back, and it's going to get ugly." I looked at the Costco building in front of me, at the people streaming in and out, at the vast Arizona sky that stretched out overhead like a bleached canvas. "Robert," I said quietly, "do you remember what you told me 3 years ago? When Emily's father made that comment at Thanksgiving about me being decent middle-class stock for his daughter." "I remember," Robert said carefully. "You said I should tell her the truth. You said I should explain everything. You said secrets in a marriage were poison." "I did say that, and I said I wanted to wait. I said I wanted to know she loved me for who I was, not what I had. I said I wanted to be sure." "I remember that too." "Well," I said, "I'm sure now. I'm sure that the woman I married doesn't exist anymore. I'm sure that the person she's become would only see dollar signs. And I'm sure that I'm done pretending my life is smaller than it actually is." There was a long pause. When Robert spoke again, his voice was all business. "I'll need you to come to the office. We have documents to sign. And David, yeah, this is going to shock her," he said. "Her and her father and everyone in their whole social circle. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about Emily's laugh, about the performance, about 4 years of slowly shrinking myself to fit into her increasingly narrow definition of who I should be. "Robert," I said, "I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully." "I'm listening. For the past 4 years, I have lived in a rental house worth $2,400 a month. I have driven a Honda Accord. I have worked an accounting job at Morrison and Associates that pays $73,000 a year. I have packed my lunch in Tupperware containers and shop sales and lived the exact life that Emily wanted me to live so she could feel superior to me while still being married." "David, I'm not done," I said quietly. "For the past 4 years, I have watched my wife slowly transform into a person who measures human worth in material possessions. I have listened to her mock me to her friends. I have endured comments about my lack of ambition and my mediocre life and my adequate everything. And I have done it all while knowing that if I told her the truth, if I showed her the bank statements and the property deeds and the investment portfolios, she would either never believe me or she would suddenly love me again for all the wrong reasons." Robert was silent. "So yes," I said, "I'm prepared for the shock because Emily doesn't actually know me at all. She knows the character I've been playing, and I'm tired of playing him." "When can you come to the office?" Robert asked. I checked my watch. It was 2:47 p.m. "Give me an hour. I need to make a phone call first." "Who to?" I smiled, though there was no humor in it. "Her father." "David, don't worry," I said. "I'm not going to tell him anything, not yet. But James Whitmore has been treating me like his daughter's charity case for 4 years, and it's time to start changing that narrative." I hung up before Robert could argue. Then I sat in my car in the Costco parking lot, in the brutal Phoenix heat, and I made a list. Not on paper, in my head. The kind of list you make when you're about to burn down everything you've carefully constructed, and you want to make sure you don't forget anything important in the flames. The list went like this. 1. My wife had just publicly humiliated me and demanded a divorce. 2. My wife had no idea who she'd actually married. 3. Her father, who'd spent 4 years treating me like I was beneath his family, was about to find out exactly how much beneath him I wasn't. 4. I owned the house we'd been renting. I owned it outright. Had owned it for 6 years. Had bought it with cash the year before I met Emily. When I was 26 years old and fresh off selling my first software company for $18 million, Emily had always thought we were renting. I'd let her think we were renting. Because I'd wanted to know, needed to know, that she loved me for who I was, not what I had. And now I knew. I started the car. I drove out of the Costco parking lot, and I began the process of introducing my wife to the husband she'd never actually met. Part 2. The Empire of Shadows. The thing about money, real money, the kind that accumulates silently in investment portfolios and real estate holdings and carefully structured trusts, is that it doesn't announce itself unless you want it to. It sits there, patient, invisible, waiting. People assume that wealth is always loud, always obvious, always dripping from your wrists and parked in your driveway. They're wrong. I learned this at 24 when I sold my first company. The company was called Streamline Analytics, and it was software I'd built in my apartment while working a day job at a tech startup that paid me $45,000 a year and treated their engineers like interchangeable components. The software itself was elegant in its simplicity. It helped mid-sized companies optimize their supply chain logistics using machine learning before everyone and their cousin was slapping AI-powered onto their marketing materials. I built it nights and weekends for 18 months, lived on ramen and coffee, taught myself Python and R and enough business strategy to pitch to actual companies, got my first client, a manufacturing firm in Tucson, by cold calling them 53 times until someone finally took the meeting just to make me stop. That first client led to 3 more. Those 3 led to 12. 12 led to a platform that actually worked, that actually saved companies real money, that actually solved real problems. And then, on a Tuesday morning in March 2018, I got an email from a venture capital firm in San Francisco asking if I'd be interested in discussing an acquisition. 6 months later, I walked out of a conference room with a wire transfer confirmation for $18.3 million. I was 24 years old. I had more money than my parents had earned in their combined lifetimes, and I had absolutely no idea what to do with it. My first instinct was to tell everyone, to buy the flashy car and the fancy watch, and do all the things lottery winners do right before they go spectacularly broke. But I had a lawyer, Robert Chen, who I'd met at ASU and who was working at a mid-sized firm in Phoenix, and Robert sat me down in his office and said 6 words that changed everything. Money makes you a target, David. He showed me the statistics. How many people who come into sudden wealth lose it within 5 years? How many relationships implode under the weight of financial imbalance? How many families tear themselves apart fighting over inherited fortunes? You're young, he said. You're smart, and you just won the lottery. The question is, do you want everyone to know you won, or do you want to actually keep the money? I thought about it for exactly 30 seconds. I want to keep it, I said. Then here's what we're going to do, Robert said. And he pulled out a legal pad and started sketching out a structure that would become the blueprint for the next 6 years of my life. The structure went like this. I created a series of LLCs and trusts with names that sounded boring and institutional. Redstone Holdings, Cascade Property Management, Summit Investment Group. I paid cash for properties through these entities, never in my own name. I invested in index funds and municipal bonds and boring, stable things that wouldn't make me rich quick, but would keep me rich forever. I kept my job at the tech startup for another year, living off my $45,000 salary, while my actual wealth grew silently in the background. When I finally quit, I told people I was going to work as a freelance consultant, which was technically true. I did occasionally consult, usually for free, for friends who were starting their own companies. What I didn't tell anyone was that I spent most of my time managing my real estate portfolio and studying for my CPA license, which I completed just to have something respectable to put on a business card. I bought my first property, the house that would later become the site of my unraveling marriage, when I was 25. It was a 2,400 square foot ranch-style home in Scottsdale with a pool and a view of Camelback Mountain. The neighborhood was nice, but not ostentatious, the kind of place where people were comfortable but not crazy rich. It cost $680,000. I paid cash. Over the next 2 years, I bought 4 more properties, a condo in downtown Phoenix that I rented to a tech executive for $3,800 a month, a duplex in Tempe that generated steady rental income from ASU students, a small commercial building in Mesa that I leased to a physical therapy practice, a vacation rental in Sedona that booked solid during tourist season. By the time I met Emily, I owned 5 properties worth a combined $3.2 million, had an investment portfolio worth another $7.8 million, and was generating enough passive income that I never technically had to work another day in my life. And I told her none of it, not because I was trying to deceive her, or maybe I was, but not maliciously. I just wanted to meet someone who loved me for the person I was in the moment, not the person I could theoretically become or the lifestyle I could theoretically provide. So when we met at a mutual friend's barbecue in the summer of 2020, I introduced myself as an accountant, which was true. I had my CPA license. I just didn't mention that I mostly used it to manage my own assets. When she asked where I lived, I said Scottsdale. I didn't mention that I owned the house. When she asked what I drove, I said Honda Accord. I didn't mention that it was a choice, not a necessity. We dated for a year. She was working as a marketing coordinator for a boutique hotel chain, making around $52,000 a year. We went to moderately priced restaurants. We took a road trip to San Diego and stayed at a Holiday Inn. We cooked dinner at my rental house and watched movies on a couch I'd bought at IKEA specifically because it seemed like the kind of couch a regular guy would have. I fell in love with her slowly, carefully. She was smart and funny and ambitious in a way that felt energizing rather than exhausting. She talked about wanting to start her own marketing firm someday, about traveling to places that weren't just Instagram backdrops, about building something that mattered. I proposed on a hike in Sedona with a ring I'd bought for $4,000. Nice, but not extravagant. She said yes with tears in her eyes and told me she didn't care that we didn't have much money, that love was more important than wealth, that we'd build our life together. I believed her. God, I believed her. We got married in a small ceremony at a vineyard in northern Arizona. 50 guests. Simple but elegant. Her father paid for most of it, which should have been my first warning sign. James Whitmore, real estate developer, self-made millionaire, and a man who believed that money was the most accurate measure of a person's worth. He pulled me aside at the rehearsal dinner and, "David," he said, swirling his scotch, "I want you to know I had you investigated." I kept my face neutral. "Did you?" "Standard practice for anyone marrying into my family," he said casually, like he was discussing the weather. "You check out. Decent credit, no criminal record, stable employment. You're what my father would have called good middle-class stock." Middle-class stock. Like I was a breed of dog or a vintage of wine. "I'm glad you approve," I said, my voice carefully empty of inflection. "I didn't say I approved," he corrected, leaning in. "I said you checked out. There's a difference. Emily could have done better, but she seems to love you. God knows why. So I'm going to give you the same advice I give all my employees. Don't disappoint me." That should have been the moment, right then at my own rehearsal dinner, with my soon-to-be father-in-law comparing me to his employees. That should have been when I told him that his decent middle-class stock son-in-law owned more property than James probably thought I'd ever seen, that my investment portfolio would make his real estate holdings look cute, that I was playing a different game than he even knew existed. But I didn't, because Emily was across the room, laughing with her friends, and she looked so happy, and I thought, God, I actually thought, that if she loved me now, when she thought I had nothing, then I'd know it was real. And someday, when the time was right, I'd tell her everything, and we'd laugh about the absurdity of it all. We spent our honeymoon in Costa Rica. Business class tickets that I told her I'd saved up for. A nice resort that I let her believe was a splurge. We ziplined through the jungle and swam in waterfalls and lay on beaches where the sand was the color of rust and the water was the temperature of bathwater. She told me she'd never been happier. I believe that too. The first year of marriage was good. We fell into a rhythm. She worked her marketing job. I kept up my accounting consulting work, which meant I spent my days managing my properties and investments from the home office, while occasionally taking on a real client to maintain the illusion. We cooked together, watched TV together, made love and made plans, and made it work. But then her father's business exploded. James Whitmore had always been successful, but in 2022, he caught a wave. He'd invested early in several commercial properties in Paradise Valley right before Phoenix's real estate market went supernova. He flipped them at exactly the right moment, then leveraged that capital into a development deal that turned his comfortable millions into serious wealth. Suddenly, the Whitmore family had money. Real money. The kind of money that came with an 8,000 square foot estate and country club memberships, and friends who summered in the Hamptons. And Emily started to change. It was subtle at first. Comments about how her friends were traveling to Europe while we were taking weekend trips to Flagstaff. Observations about how her college roommate's husband had just made partner at his law firm while I was still doing freelance accounting. Questions about when I was going to get more ambitious, pursue bigger clients, want more out of life. I tried to be understanding, tried to explain that I was happy with our life, that we had everything we needed. That constantly chasing more was a trap that left people exhausted and empty. Easy for you to say, she'd replied. You've never had more to chase. That was the moment I knew I was in trouble, because she was right. From her perspective, I'd never had more to chase. I was just a decent guy with a decent job and decent prospects. I was the human equivalent of a Honda Accord, reliable, efficient, and utterly unexciting. And as her father's wealth grew, as her social circle expanded to include people for whom $1,000 dinner was normal, as she spent more time at the country club and less time at home, that decency became something she resented rather than appreciated. The comments got sharper, more frequent, more public. At her friend's birthday party, where the champagne cost more than our monthly rent, David's a simple guy. He doesn't really understand luxury. At her parents' house for Sunday dinner, we'd love to travel more. The But accounting doesn't pay like real estate development. At the country club where I'd reluctantly joined her for a fundraiser, my husband thinks $200 is expensive for a dress. Can you imagine? Each comment landed like a paper cut, small, precise, accumulating into something that eventually bled. I watched her transform. Watched the woman who'd said she didn't care about money start measuring everything in dollars. Watched her prioritize time with friends who compared husbands like they were quarterly earnings reports. Watched her become someone who used words like adequate and mediocre and settling. And I said nothing. I let her believe the story she was telling herself, that she'd married beneath her potential, that she was trapped in a small life, that she deserved better than what I could provide. Because here's the thing about secrets. They become corrosive. Once you keep one long enough, once you let it calcify into the foundation of your relationship, you can't just casually reveal it. It becomes an indictment of everything that came before. If I told her the truth, that I owned our house, that I had more wealth than her father, that I'd been playing poor for 4 years, she would never forgive me. Not for having the money, for hiding it, for letting her build her identity around being disappointed in me when I could have prevented it all along. So I stayed quiet, and I watched our marriage die by degrees, until today, until she put me on speakerphone at the country club and made our divorce her entertainment. And now, driving through Phoenix with the afternoon sun beating down through the windshield, I was done being quiet. I pulled into the parking garage of Robert's law firm, a sleek modern building in downtown Phoenix with floor-to-ceiling windows and the kind of minimalist design that screamed expensive good taste. The elevator played soft jazz as it carried me to the 14th floor. The receptionist recognized me and waved me through. Robert was waiting in his office, documents already spread across his conference table, like a general preparing for battle. David, he said, standing to shake my hand, you look terrible. My wife just divorced me in a Costco, I said, dropping into a chair. How should I look? Fair point. He sat down across from me. Let's talk about what happens next. Before we do that, I said, I need to know something. Emily said she's having her lawyer contact me. Who do you think she'll use? Robert made a face. Probably someone from her father's firm. They keep a law practice on retainer for the family business. Corporate attorneys who dabble in family law because rich people like keeping everything in-house. Will they be good? They'll be expensive, Robert said. Whether they're good at divorce law specifically is another question. But David, it doesn't matter how good they are. You have something they don't have. What's that? The truth, he said simply. and documentation, and a paper trail that's going to turn this entire situation on its head. He pulled out a folder, started laying out documents. Let's start with the obvious, he said. The house. She thinks you're renting it. You've been paying the rent into an account you control, which she's never seen. The lease is through one of your LLCs. As far as she knows, you're a tenant. As far as the law knows, I'm the landlord, I finished, and she's been living in my property. Exactly. Now, in Arizona, property owned before marriage is generally considered separate property, not community property. You bought that house 2 years before you even met her. She has no claim to it. And the other properties? Also purchased before marriage. Also separate property, same with the bulk of your investment portfolio. He flipped through papers. Your current net worth as of last quarter is approximately $14.7 million. Of that, roughly $12.3 million is clearly separate property. The remaining $2.4 million represents growth during the marriage, which gets complicated. I absorbed this, and what about her father's business? What about it? He's been giving her money, I said. Regular deposits into her personal account. $2,000 a month for the past 2 years, plus bonuses, plus gifts. He bought her the BMW she drives, paid for her country club membership. She's been living a lifestyle well beyond what our combined official incomes could support. Robert's eyebrows went up. That's interesting, very interesting. Because if her father's been supplementing her lifestyle, that could be considered a gift or her separate property, which means it's not community property either. So what does that leave? Not much, Robert said bluntly. Your official salary from your consulting work, the income you've been reporting to her. That's community property, but it's what, maybe $70,000, $80,000 a year for 4 years? So call it $320,000 total, minus living expenses. We're talking about maybe $50,000, $75,000 of actual community property, if that. She's going to lose her mind, I said. David, Robert leaned forward, she's going to do more than lose her mind. She's going to argue that you deliberately hid assets, that you committed fraud, that you misrepresented your financial situation. Did I? No, he said firmly. You never lied to her about your finances. You just didn't volunteer information. There's no law that says you have to disclose your premarital assets during a marriage, especially when there was no commingling of funds. You kept your finances separate. You paid for household expenses from joint accounts that were funded by your consulting income. Everything you did was legal. But she'll make it sound like it wasn't. She'll try, Robert agreed. Her lawyers will absolutely try to paint you as deceptive. But here's the thing, Arizona is a no-fault divorce state. It doesn't matter who did what or who was the bad guy. What matters is the math. And the math is very, very clear. He pulled out another document. Now, here's where it gets fun. You said she told her friends you can't give her the life she deserves, right? That you're mediocre and adequate and all those wonderful adjectives? Yes. Do you have any of that recorded? Text messages, emails? I thought about it. Pulled out my phone, started scrolling through our text history, found what I was looking for. Here, I said, handing him the phone. From 3 months ago. Robert read aloud. David, I don't know how much longer I can do this. My friends are traveling to Italy and buying second homes, and you're excited because you saved $40 on chicken at Costco. I'm not built for this mediocre life. I thought I was, but I'm not. I deserve more than what you can give me. He looked up. This is perfect. Perfect? She's establishing a pattern of financial dissatisfaction. She's documenting that she believes you're not providing adequately for her, which means when we reveal the truth, that you've actually been providing far beyond what she knew, it's going to demolish her credibility. I felt something shift in my chest. Not quite satisfaction, not quite revenge, something colder and more certain. What about the call today? I asked. The speakerphone thing at the club? Were you recording? No, doesn't matter. Were there witnesses? At least 4 or 5 of her friends, maybe more. Robert smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. David, she just humiliated you publicly, made your divorce entertainment. That's going to play very, very badly for her if this gets contentious. Judges don't like cruelty, and what she did was cruel. So what's the play? Here's what I recommend, Robert said, pulling out a legal pad. We're going to file our response to her divorce petition. In that response, We're going to include a complete and accurate financial disclosure. Every property, every investment, every account. Full transparency. She's going to freak out. Yes, completely, because she's going to realize several things simultaneously. One, you've been far wealthier than she ever knew. Two, she just divorced you thinking she was leaving a poor man. Three, she has no claim to any of your premarital assets. And four, she just made this divorce extremely public and extremely ugly for absolutely no financial gain. I sat back in my chair. And her father? What about him? He's going to know that I let him treat me like a charity case for 4 years when I could have bought his entire company 3 times over. Is that a problem? I thought about James Whitmore, about his condescending smiles and his middle-class stock comment and his assumption that money was the same as worth. No, I said, that's not a problem at all. Robert studied me. David, I have to ask. You could have avoided all of this. You could have told Emily the truth at any point. Why didn't you? I looked out the window at downtown Phoenix, at the buildings catching the late afternoon sun, at the city sprawling out toward the mountains in every direction. Because I wanted to know, I said finally. I wanted to know if she loved me, the actual me, not the version of me that comes with a real estate portfolio, and now I do know. That's a very expensive way to find out, Robert said quietly. Maybe, I agreed, but at least it's definitive. He nodded, started gathering the documents. I'll need you to sign some things. Authorization for full financial disclosure, retainer agreement, few other standard items. Then we'll file our response tomorrow. Tomorrow? The faster we move, the better, Robert said. Strike while she's still confident she has the upper hand. Let her lawyers get cocky, then hit them with the reality. I picked up a pen, started signing where he indicated. Robert, I said, pausing halfway through the stack of papers, what do you think is going to happen when she finds out? He looked at me for a long moment. Honestly, I think she's going to try to fight it. I think she's going to argue that you deliberately deceived her. I think she's going to make a lot of noise about how unfair this is. And then when her lawyers explain to her that she actually has no legal leg to stand on, I think she's going to accept a settlement and spend the rest of her life telling everyone that you were a manipulative liar who tricked her into marrying you. That doesn't sound great. It's not, Robert agreed. But David, here's the thing. You didn't trick her. You gave her exactly what she said she wanted. A man who loved her for who she was, not what he could buy for her. You just did it from a position of strength instead of weakness, and she's going to hate you for that. I can live with that, I said. I finished signing the documents. Robert collected them, tapped them into a neat stack, slipped them into a folder with my name on it. One more thing, he said. What are you going to do about the house? What do you mean? I mean, she thinks you're both renting it. When she finds out you own it, she's going to realize she's been living in your property. That's going to be humiliating for her. But legally, she has a right to remain in the house during the divorce proceedings unless you formally evict her, which would look terrible. I considered this. How long do divorce proceedings typically take? In Arizona, if it's uncontested and we can reach a settlement, maybe 60 to 90 days. If she fights it, he shrugged. Could be 6 months, could be a year. I'm not living with her for a year, I said. Hell, I'm not living with her for another week. So you'll move out? I have the condo downtown, I said. The one I've been renting to that tech executive. His lease is actually up next month. I'll just not renew it. Move in there. Let Emily have the house until this is sorted out. That's generous of you. Not generous, I corrected. Strategic. I don't want to be accused of making her homeless or forcing her out. Let her stay. Let her feel secure. And then when the dust settles and the divorce is final, I'll decide what to do with the property. Robert nodded slowly. You've thought about this. I've had 18 months to think about this, I said. Every time she made a comment about our mediocre life, every time she compared me to her friends' husbands, every time she made me feel small, I've been planning this conversation in my head. And how do you feel now that it's happening? I stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the city. I feel, I said slowly, like I've been holding my breath for 4 years, and I'm finally about to exhale. Robert joined me at the window. David, I want you to understand something. What you're about to do, revealing all of this, pulling back the curtain, it's going to change everything, not just your marriage, your reputation, your relationships, Emily's family. People are going to have opinions, strong ones. Good, I said. Good? Robert, For 4 years, I've been a supporting character in Emily's life, the boring husband, the adequate provider, the guy who shops at Costco and drives a Honda and apparently feels nothing. I'm tired of being that character. I'm tired of playing small, and I'm really, really tired of being treated like I should be grateful that someone like Emily deigned to marry someone like me. I turned to face him. So, yes, let it change everything. Let them have their opinions. At least they'll be having opinions about who I actually am. Robert studied me for a moment, then extended his hand. All right, then. Let's burn it down and see what grows in the ashes. I shook his hand. When should I expect the fireworks? Probably tomorrow afternoon, he said. We'll file the response in the morning. Her lawyers will see it by noon. By 2 p.m., your phone is going to start ringing. Her or her father? Oh, Robert said with a slight smile. Definitely her father first. Emily's going to need a minute to process. But James Whitmore, the second his lawyers call him, he's going to lose his mind because he's been treating you like a peasant for 4 years, and he's about to find out that the peasant owns more land than he does. I checked my watch. It was almost 4 p.m. The sun was starting its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the Phoenix sky in shades of orange and gold. I should go, I said. I need to pack some things. I assume I shouldn't be at the house when she gets home. Probably wise, Robert agreed. Go to your condo, get settled, turn off your phone if you want. And David? Yeah? Get some rest, because tomorrow, your very quiet life is about to get very, very loud. I left his office, took the elevator downward, walked through the lobby where people in expensive suits conducted expensive business. Got in my Honda Accord, which suddenly felt less like a practical choice and more like a costume I was about to take off. I drove back to Scottsdale, to the house I owned but had pretended to rent, and I started packing. 4 years of marriage fit into 3 suitcases and 2 boxes. That felt about right. Part 3, the morning after I slept terribly. The condo downtown was nice, 1,400 square feet with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Roosevelt Row, the kind of space that tech executives paid $800 a month to rent because it had exposed brick and industrial lighting and made them feel like they lived in a cooler city than Phoenix. I'd furnished it simply when I bought it 6 years ago. A good mattress, a couch, basic kitchen supplies, and everything a person needed. Nothing they didn't. But it wasn't home. Or maybe it wasn't the home I'd been pretending to live in for 4 years, which was worse. I'd turned my phone off the night before, following Robert's advice. Didn't want to see the messages I knew were probably accumulating like a digital storm. Didn't want to deal with the aftermath until the aftermath was official. So I lay in bed in my empty condo, listening to the sounds of downtown Phoenix on a Tuesday night. Sirens and car horns and the bass thump of music from bars 2 blocks away. And I thought about my marriage. Here's what nobody tells you about secrets. They're exhausting. For 4 years, I'd been curating at every detail of my life, making sure the car I drove matched the story I was telling, ensuring that my clothes came from acceptable places, not too cheap to seem broke, not too expensive to seem suspicious, monitoring every conversation for potential slip-ups, maintaining a character, and for what? So that Emily could love me authentically, so that I could be sure her feelings were real? The problem with that logic, I realized at 3 a.m. staring at an unfamiliar ceiling, was that it was built on a false premise. You can't test someone's authenticity by lying to them. You can't build real intimacy on a foundation of deception, even if the deception is one of omission rather than commission. I told myself I was protecting our relationship, making sure it was pure, making sure Emily loved me for me. But really, I'd been protecting myself from rejection, from the possibility that someone would only want me for my money, and from having to be vulnerable about the thing I was most insecure about, whether I was worth loving without it. And now, lying in the dark, I had my answer. I was worth loving, just not by Emily. I finally fell asleep around 4 a.m. and woke up at 9:13 to sunlight streaming through windows I'd forgotten to cover. For a moment, I had that disoriented feeling of not knowing where I was. Then it all came rushing back. Right, the divorce, the reveal, the end of everything. I made coffee in a kitchen that didn't have my favorite mug. Took a shower in a bathroom where all the towels smelled like storage rather than fabric softener. Got dressed in clothes from a suitcase instead of a closet. The small indignities of displacement. At 10 a.m., I turned my phone back on. It took approximately 30 seconds for the messages to start flooding in. 17 missed calls, 34 text messages, 8 voicemails. and one email from Robert with the subject line, "It's done." I opened the email first. David filed our response at 8:47 a.m. Complete financial disclosure included. I've already gotten 3 calls from opposing counsel asking if there's been some kind of mistake. I assured them there has not been a mistake. You are, in fact, worth exactly what our filing says you're worth. I estimate you have about 2 hours before Emily finds out. Her father probably knows already. I'm sure his lawyers called him the second they saw the filing. But Emily herself is likely still in the dark. Prepare yourself. When she finds out, it's going to be bad. Call me if you need anything. Took her 2 hours. I looked at the time, 10:04 a.m., which meant somewhere around noon. My wife was going to learn that her boring, mediocre, adequate husband was worth nearly $15 million. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I scrolled through the text messages. Most were from numbers I didn't recognize. A few from coworkers at my old consulting job, probably just checking in. 3 from my brother in Seattle, each one progressively more concerned. And then I saw the ones from Emily. The first one had come in at 11:47 p.m. last night. "Where are you? Did you seriously just leave?" Then at 12:34 a.m. "David, this is ridiculous. Come home so we can talk like adults." At 1:15 a.m. "Fine, be childish. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow. I hope you have a good attorney because you're going to need one." And finally, at 8:23 a.m. "My lawyer says you haven't responded to any of their calls. You need to engage with this process. David, running away won't change anything." I stared at that last message, the confidence in it, the certainty that she held all the cards, that I was running scared, that this divorce was going to go exactly the way she wanted it to. She had no idea. I made myself breakfast: scrambled eggs, toast, coffee that tasted wrong because it wasn't from my usual coffee maker. I ate it standing at the kitchen counter, looking out the window at downtown Phoenix waking up for the day. My phone rang at 11:47 a.m. James Whitmore. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again 30 seconds later. Again. Voicemail. Then a text from him. "We need to talk. Now." I didn't respond. At 12:03 p.m., my phone rang again. This time it was Emily. I stared at her name on the screen. At that wedding photo, I still hadn't changed. At the life that photo represented, the future we'd thought we were building, the promises we'd made on a vineyard in northern Arizona while our friends watched and cheered. I answered, "David!" Her voice was different, tight, controlled, like she was trying very hard not to scream. "David, what the fuck did you do?" "Hello, Emily," I said calmly. "How are you? How am I?" She laughed, but it was a brittle sound, nothing like her real laugh. "How am I? I just found out from my lawyer that my husband has been lying to me for 4 years about everything. About everything, David, so you tell me, how the fuck should I be?" I took a sip of coffee. "I haven't lied to you about anything." "You own our house," she shouted. "You own it. We've been paying rent. I've been budgeting my money, feeling guilty about spending too much, trying to save so we could maybe buy something someday. And you own the house the entire time." "I do own it," I confirmed. "Bought it in 2018, 2 years before we met." "And you didn't think to mention this?" "You never asked." "I never—" She stopped. I could hear her breathing hard, trying to control herself. "David, this is insane. You know this is insane, right? You let me believe we were renting. You let me think we were struggling. You watched me worry about money when you've been sitting on millions of dollars?" 15 million, I corrected. Give or take. The market's been volatile. Silence. Then, "I'm going to destroy you. Do you understand me? My lawyer is going to tear you apart. You deliberately hid assets. You committed fraud. I didn't commit fraud," I said calmly. "I didn't hide anything. I just didn't volunteer information about assets I owned before we were married. Assets that are, legally speaking, none of your business. None of my— We're married, David. Or we probably were until you decided to divorce me," I interrupted. "Remember yesterday at the country club when you put me on speakerphone and made our marriage ending into entertainment for your friends?" Another silence. Longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice was different, smaller. "You're doing this because I hurt your feelings?" "No," I said. "I'm doing this because you showed me exactly who you've become. And I'm tired of pretending to be someone I'm not, so you can feel superior to me." "I never asked you to pretend to be anything." "Yes, you did," I said quietly. Every time you compared me to your friends' husbands, every time you complained about our mediocre life, every time you made it clear that I wasn't enough. You asked me to be less than I am so you could justify your disappointment. And I let you because I loved you, because I thought maybe if I was patient enough, you'd remember why you married me in the first place. This is, she started it again. You can't do this. You can't just, my father is going to, your father called me 15 minutes ago, I said. I didn't answer. I assume he's upset. He's beyond upset. David, do you understand what you've done? How this looks? You made our entire family look like fools. No, I said. I let your entire family treat me like a fool. There's a difference. I never claimed to be poor. I just didn't correct your assumptions. That's the same as lying. Legally, it's not. Morally, I paused. Morally, Emily, I wanted to know if you loved me. The real me, not the version that comes with a real estate portfolio. And now I know. That's not fair, isn't it? You filed for divorce because you thought I couldn't give you the life you deserved. Those were your words. And you never even asked what life I could actually give you. You just assumed. So tell me, Emily, if I had told you the truth on our first date, would you have loved me differently? That's not, would you have? I pressed. If I'd shown up in a Mercedes instead of a Honda? If I'd taken you to five-star restaurants instead of that Thai place you loved? If I'd told you I owned 5 properties instead of renting one? Would you have loved me more? Or just loved my money? You're twisting this. I'm asking you a direct question. Silence again. Long enough that I thought she might have hung up. Then, quietly, it would have been different. Different how? I don't know, she said, and she sounded tired suddenly. It would have been different. And maybe that's not fair. Maybe that makes me shallow. But David, you don't understand what it's like to watch everyone around you have more, to feel like you're always compromising, to wonder if you settled. I watched you have that experience for 2 years, I said. I watched you change. I watched you become someone who measured worth in dollars and judged me by the car I drove. And I chose not to tell you the truth because I knew that if I did, everything would change. You'd either resent me for hiding it or you'd suddenly love me for having it. Neither of those options was real. So instead, you let me divorce you? You were going to divorce me anyway, I said. Yesterday proved that. You didn't want to work on our marriage. You didn't want counseling or communication or any of the things people do when they're trying to save something. You wanted out. You wanted permission to upgrade to someone more impressive. And I gave you that permission by humiliating me, by being honest, finally, completely, about who I actually am and what I actually have. If that humiliates you, Emily, that says more about you than it does about me. I could hear voices in the background. Her mother, maybe, or her father. I have to go, she said. But David, this isn't over. My lawyer is going to fight this. You don't get to keep everything while I get nothing. You're not getting nothing, I said. You're getting exactly what Arizona law entitles you to, which is a portion of the community property we accumulated during our marriage. My lawyer estimates that's somewhere between $50,000 and $75,000. Plus, you can keep the BMW your father bought you and anything else that was gifted to you specifically. 50,000? Her voice went up an octave. You're worth $15 million and you're offering me 50,000? I'm offering you what's legally yours. Everything else is separate property. I'm sorry if that's disappointing, but disappointing? David, I gave you 4 years of my life. And I gave you 4 years of mine, I said quietly. I cooked you dinner. I listened to your problems. I supported your career. I loved you. I did all of that while you slowly decided I wasn't good enough. So no, Emily, you don't get half of my assets because we were married for 4 years. You get what you contributed to during our marriage, which, since you were living off your father's money and I was living off mine, is very, very little. I hate you, she said. I genuinely hate you right now. I know. I said, but Emily, yesterday you humiliated me on speakerphone to make your friends laugh. You turned our marriage ending into a performance. So we're even. I hung up. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. My coffee had gone cold. And I felt more alive than I had in 2 years. The phone rang again immediately. James Whitmore. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that I didn't listen to. Sent 3 more texts that I didn't read. My brother called. I answered that one. David? Marcus sounded worried. Man, what's going on? I got 3 calls from Emily's family trying to reach you. Are you okay? I'm fine, I said. Emily and I are getting divorced. Jesus, I'm sorry. Do you want me to fly down? No, I'm good. I paused. It's actually a relief. Yeah? He sounded skeptical. Because usually divorces aren't relieving, they're devastating. This one's different. How so? I looked around the condo, at the expensive furniture and the view of downtown and all the things I'd carefully hidden from my own wife for 4 years. I'll explain later, I said. But Marcus? Remember how Emily always talked about me like I was underachieving, like I needed to be more ambitious? Yeah, that always pissed me off. Well, she just found out I'm worth $15 million dollars and she has no claim to any of it. Silence, then, holy shit. Yeah, David, my brother said slowly, you need to explain to me right now how you're worth $15 million dollars and I didn't know about it. Long story. I'll tell you everything, but the short version is I sold a company before I met Emily, invested well, kept it quiet, wanted to make sure people loved me for me, not my money. And Emily didn't. Emily loved the idea of me. And then she met people with more money and decided the idea wasn't good enough anymore. Marcus whistled. So what happens now? Now, I said, her lawyers try to figure out if there's any way to claim I committed fraud or hid assets or did something illegal. They'll fail because I didn't. And then we settle for a relatively small amount and I move on with my life. And the house? The house was always mine. I owned it before we met. Does she know that now? She does. How'd she take it? I thought about Emily's voice on the phone. The shock, the anger, the betrayal. About as well as you'd expect, I said. We talked for another 20 minutes. I told him everything, the company, the investments, the properties, the 4 years of playing poor. He listened, occasionally interjecting with, Jesus Christ, or, are you serious, or, how did you keep this secret for so long? When I was done, he said, David, I need you to know something. What? I'm proud of you for building all of that, for being smart with your money, for not being an idiot and blowing it all on stupid shit. But man, that's a hell of a secret to keep, especially from your wife. I know. Do you think, looking back, you should have told her? I considered the question, really considered it. No, I said finally, because if I'd told her, I would never have known who she really was. I would have spent our entire marriage wondering if she loved me or my bank account. This way, I know. It hurts like hell, but I know. That's a really expensive way to find out. That's what my lawyer said. Your lawyer's smart. He is, Marcus sighed. All right, well, let me know if you need anything. And David? Yeah? Maybe consider telling the next woman up front, because this whole secret millionaire thing seems exhausting. Noted, I said. We hung up. I sat in my empty condo with my cold coffee and my shaking hands and the wreckage of my marriage scattered across 17 missed calls and 34 text messages. And I waited for the next explosion. It came at 2:07 p.m. A call from an unknown number. I answered, expecting another lawyer. Instead, I got James Whitmore's voice, tight with barely controlled rage. David, my office, now. I don't think that's a good idea, I said calmly. I don't care what you think. You owe me an explanation. I don't owe you anything. You made my family look like fools, his voice rose. You let me treat you like charity for 4 years when you've been sitting on a fortune? Do you have any idea how that makes me look? Like a man who judges people by their bank accounts, I suggested. Don't get smart with me, son. I'm not your son. I was your son-in-law, past tense. And you know what, James? You treated me exactly the way you wanted to treat me. You made assumptions about who I was based on what I drove and where you thought I lived and how much you thought I made. I never confirmed those assumptions. I just didn't correct them. That's on you, not me. You deliberately deceived us. I deliberately let you reveal who you really were, I corrected. And turns out, you're a man who thinks money equals worth. Which is fine, you can think that, but don't pretend I'm the bad guy for not meeting your standards when your standards were garbage to begin with. How dare you? How dare I what? Not brag about my wealth? Not wave my bank statements around at your Sunday dinners? Not compete with your real estate empire to prove I was good enough for your daughter, James? I didn't want to compete with you. I wanted to be loved. Turns out your daughter wanted someone to compete with you. And now that she knows I can, she's furious. She threw me away. He was breathing hard. I could hear it through the phone. Emily's distraught, he said finally. She's been crying all morning. Her mother's with her. She says you tricked her, that you let her believe you were someone you're not. I am exactly who I always was, I said quietly. I just have more money than she thought. If that changes who I am in her eyes, that's her problem, not mine. She loved you. She loved her idea of me. There's a difference. You're going to pay for this, James said, his voice going cold. My lawyers are the best in the state. They will find something, some way to prove you acted in bad faith. And when they do, James, I interrupted, your lawyers are already looking, and they're going to come back and tell you the same thing mine already told me. I did nothing illegal. I owned property before the marriage. I kept it separate. I didn't commingle funds. Everything I did was by the book. You can threaten me all you want, but the law is pretty clear here. The house is mine, bought and paid for in 2018. Emily's been living in my property rent-free for 4 years. If anything, she should be thanking me. She didn't know it was your property. She never asked. That's... He stopped, started again. What do you want, David? What do I want? From this divorce. From Emily. What's your price? My price? Everyone has a price. He said. You want more? To make this go away quietly? To not embarrass my family further? Name it. I stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the city that had been my home for 15 years. I don't want anything from Emily, except a clean divorce, I said. I don't want her money. She doesn't have any. I don't want your money. I have plenty of my own. I don't want to embarrass your family any more than Emily already embarrassed me yesterday at the country club. I just want this to be over so I can move on with my life. Then sign whatever settlement agreement we send over, at the legally appropriate amount, I interrupted. Your lawyers already know what that is. $50,000 to $75,000, maybe less depending on how the final numbers shake out. Emily keeps her car and anything else you've gifted her. I keep my premarital assets. We split whatever minimal community property exists. Clean, simple. Done. That's insulting. That's the law. She deserves better than that. Why? I asked genuinely. Because she was married to me? Because she spent 4 years disappointed in who she thought I was? James, your daughter told me yesterday that I was mediocre, that I was adequate, that I couldn't give her the life she deserved. She filed for divorce because she wanted to upgrade. Fine, she's upgraded herself right into $50,000 and a lesson about making assumptions. I'd say that's exactly what she deserves. You're a bastard. Maybe, I agreed, or maybe I'm just someone who got tired of being treated like less than I am. Either way, James, here's what's going to happen. Your lawyers and my lawyers are going to negotiate a settlement. It's going to be fair and legal and probably disappointing to you and Emily. You're going to accept it, because if you fight it, discovery is going to be very, very public and very, very embarrassing. And then we're all going to move on with our lives. And if we don't accept, then we go to court, and a judge looks at the prenup. Oh, wait, Emily didn't want a prenup. Remember, she said it was unromantic. And the judge looks at the financials and the timeline and the fact that everything I own predates the marriage, and they rule exactly the way my lawyer says they will. Except now it's cost everyone a lot more time and money and public humiliation. Your choice. Silence. Then, I thought you were a good man, David. I am a good man, James. I'm just not a doormat. There's a difference. You and your daughter are about to learn that. I hung up. My coffee had gone completely cold. I dumped it in the sink, made a fresh cup, stood at my window watching the city. My phone buzzed. A text from Robert. James Whitmore's lawyers called. Want to negotiate. I told them we're open to reasonable discussion. They're going to send over a settlement proposal tomorrow. Get ready. It's going to be insultingly low or hilariously high, nothing in between. I texted back, let me guess. They'll offer me $10K to go away quietly, or they'll demand half of everything and threaten to drag me through court. His response came immediately. The second one. They're going to argue that your failure to disclose constitutes fraud and bad faith, and therefore all your assets should be considered community property. It won't work, but they have to try. How long until this is over? If they're smart and take our settlement offer, 2 months. If they fight, could be 6 months to a year. I don't want to fight for a year. Then let's make them an offer they can't refuse. I'll draft something tomorrow. You'll be generous, more than legally required. But not so generous, it looks like guilt. Fair? I thought about it. About Emily crying to her mother, about James Whitmore's cold anger, about 4 years of being treated like I wasn't enough. Fair, I texted back. The rest of the afternoon passed in a strange haze. I unpacked my suitcases. Set up my laptop at the kitchen counter. Checked my investment portfolio, up 2.3% for the quarter, which was nice. Ordered dinner from a Thai restaurant that wasn't the one Emily and I used to love. Ate alone. Watched the sun set over Phoenix from windows that offered a better view than my house, than my former house, than the house Emily was probably sitting in right now, surrounded by her parents, planning legal strategies that wouldn't work. At 8:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Sophia, M's friend. You're a real piece of shit, you know that? Leading her on for years, making her think you were someone you're not. She gave you the best years of her life, and you just threw her away. Hope you're happy with your money, since clearly that's all you care about. I stared at the message, thought about responding, thought about explaining, thought about defending myself. Instead, I blocked the number. Another text came in 2 minutes later. Different number. Same sentiment. One of Emily's other country club friends, probably, spreading the narrative that I was the villain here. I blocked that one too. 3 more messages came in over the next hour, all from people I barely knew, all telling me what a terrible person I was, all operating under the assumption that Emily's version of events was the only version that mattered. I blocked them all, turned off my phone, sat in the silence of my condo, and I thought about the story Emily was telling, about the lying husband who hid his wealth and tricked her into marriage, about the deceptive man who let her live a mediocre life when he could have given her everything. It was a good story, a compelling one, the kind of story that made her the victim and me the villain. And there was nothing I could do to change it, because the truth that I'd wanted to be loved for myself, that I'd kept my wealth hidden to protect myself from people who only valued money, that I'd watched her transform into someone unrecognizable and chosen not to correct her assumptions about my worth. The truth was complicated and unflattering to everyone involved. So let them tell their story. Let Emily be the wronged wife. Let me be the deceptive husband. Let the gossip flow through the country club like expensive champagne. None of it changed the facts. None of it changed the law. And none of it changed the fact that tomorrow morning, I would wake up in my own condo, start my own life, and begin the process of remembering who I was before I spent 4 years pretending to be less. I went to bed at midnight, slept better than I had in months, and woke up to 17 new voicemails, 43 text messages, and one email from Robert with the subject line, "Their settlement offer is comedy gold. The war had officially begun." Part 4. The paper trail. Robert's email had an attachment. I opened it over my third cup of coffee the next morning, prepared for whatever legal absurdity Emily's lawyers had concocted. I wasn't prepared enough. The settlement proposal was 19 pages long, single-spaced, written in the kind of dense legalese designed to intimidate people who weren't fluent in contract law. Lucky for me, I'd spent enough time managing my own investments and properties to speak lawyer nearly fluently. The summary, stripped of its pompous language, went like this. Emily was claiming she deserved half of everything, not just the community property accumulated during marriage, but half of my entire net worth. The argument was creative. I'd give them that. They claimed that by not disclosing my wealth, I had induced her into the marriage under false pretenses, that she had made life decisions based on the incorrect belief that I was of modest means, that she had sacrificed career opportunities, stayed in Arizona instead of pursuing jobs elsewhere, and suffered emotional and psychological damages from living beneath her means. Therefore, according to their legal theory, all my premarital assets should be reclassified as community property because my fraudulent concealment had tainted the entire marriage. They were asking for $7.3 million, plus attorney's fees, plus compensatory damages for emotional distress. I forwarded the email to Robert with a single line. Are they serious? His response came 30 seconds later. Dead serious. Also delusional. Want me to respond, or do you want to call them yourself to laugh? I called Robert instead. Morning, he said cheerfully. I take it you've seen the proposal? I've seen the fiction they're calling a proposal, I said. They actually think they can argue I committed fraud by not telling Emily I was rich? They can argue anything they want. Doesn't mean a judge will listen. Arizona is pretty clear on this. Premarital assets are separate property unless they've been commingled with community property. Your stuff was never commingled. You kept everything separate. Different accounts, different priorities, different everything. The only joint account you two had was the household expense account funded by your consulting income. So, this proposal is dead on arrival, Robert confirmed. But it tells us something important. They're panicking. James Whitmore is not a man accustomed to losing, and right now he's losing badly. His daughter looks foolish, he looks foolish, and their lawyers are throwing spaghetti at the wall, hoping something sticks. What do? We respond with our own proposal, something reasonable, more than you legally owe, but less than they're demanding. Make it generous enough that if they reject it, they look petty. How generous? I'm thinking 150,000, Robert said, 3 times what the law actually requires. Plus, she keeps everything her father gave her, the car, jewelry, whatever. And she gets 90 days to vacate the house, instead of the 30 days we could legally demand. That's more than fair, David. That's generous. When any reasonable judge would look at that offer and tell Emily's lawyers they're idiots for rejecting it. I thought about Emily, about the crying and the anger and the feeling of betrayal, about 4 years of marriage that had ended in a Costco parking lot. Make it $200,000, I said. What? 200,000. And she keeps the house lease paid through the end of the year, so she has time to find her own place. I don't want to be seen as the guy who kicked his ex-wife out on the street. David, Robert said slowly, you realize you're being extremely generous here. She has no legal claim to that money. I know, but I also know this is going to be public. The country club crowd is already spreading Emily's version of events, that I'm some kind of monster who deceived her. I want the settlement to reflect reality. I'm offering way more than required because, despite everything, I don't actually want to hurt her. I just want out. Robert was quiet for a moment. You know she's going to reject this, right? Her lawyers are going to tell her it's insulting after they demanded $7 million. Probably. But when this goes to court, if it goes to court, I want the judge to see that I tried. I want the record to show I was more than fair. And Robert? Yeah? I want Emily to someday realize, maybe years from now, that I never wanted to hurt her. I just wanted to stop being hurt by her. You're a better man than most people would be in this situation. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I just want to be able to sleep at night. We spent the next hour on the phone hammering out the details of our counteroffer. Robert drafted it while we talked, reading passages aloud for my input. By noon, it was done. A clean, simple, generous settlement offer that any reasonable person would accept. Which meant, of course, that Emily probably wouldn't accept it. I'm sending this over now, Robert said. Expect fireworks by dinner time. Looking forward to it, I said, meaning approximately 0% of those words. I spent the afternoon doing mundane things. Grocery shopping, setting up utilities at the condo in my name, calling my insurance company to update my address, all the boring administrative tasks of establishing a new life. It felt both momentous and completely ordinary. The fireworks Robert predicted came at 6:34 p.m. My phone rang. Emily. I debated not answering, decided that would only make things worse, and picked up. $200,000, she said without preamble. That's what you think I'm worth? 200,000? That's more than 3 times what Arizona law says you're entitled to, I said calmly. It's a generous offer, Emily. It's insulting. You're worth $15 million and you're offering me pocket change. I'm offering you money you have no legal claim to because we were married and I don't want to see you struggle. How noble of you. Emily, what do you want from me? Genuinely. Do you want me to give you millions of dollars you didn't earn and have no legal right to? Do you want me to pretend that your lawyer's argument about fraud has any merit? Do you want me to feel guilty for having money I earned before I met you? I want you to acknowledge that you lied to me. I never lied, I said tiredly. I just didn't correct your assumptions. There's a difference. That's semantics. No, it's the law. Emily, I've talked to 3 different attorneys about this, not just Robert. I wanted to be absolutely sure I wasn't crazy. And they all said the same thing. I did nothing illegal. I didn't hide assets. They were never community property to hide. I didn't commit fraud. Fraud requires me to make false statements, which I never did. I just kept my premarital finances private, which was my right. It wasn't right, she said, and her voice cracked. It wasn't right to watch me struggle with money while you had all of this. It wasn't right to let me think we couldn't afford things when you could have given me everything. It wasn't right to make me feel like I was settling when you were. She stopped. When I was what? Rich, she finished quietly. You were rich the whole time, and you let me think I'd married someone ordinary. I am ordinary, Emily. I just have money. Those are two different things. Not in the real world, they're not. And there it was, the fundamental divide that had destroyed our marriage. In your world, maybe, I said. In the world your father raised you in, the world where money equals worth and people are measured by their assets. But Emily, in the world I grew up in, character matters more than bank accounts. Integrity matters more than income. And love, real love, happens regardless of wealth. That's naive. Maybe, but I wanted to believe it anyway. I wanted to believe that you loved me enough that the money wouldn't matter, that you valued me for who I was, not what I had. And for a while, you did. That first year, before your father's business exploded, before you started spending all your time at the country club, you actually loved me then. The real me. Remember? Silence. I remember, she said finally, so quietly I almost didn't hear it. What happened, Emily? I don't know, she said. Everyone around me started having more, doing more, being more. And I felt like I was standing still, like I'd chosen safety over possibility. And I started resenting you for it. Even though I never actually limited you, you let me think you did. No, I corrected gently. You assumed I did. I never told you we couldn't afford the things. You just looked at my Honda and my Costco membership and decided I was someone who couldn't. You built this entire narrative about who I was without ever actually asking me about it. Would you have told me if I asked? I thought about that, really thought about it. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wanted to, part of me was terrified to, because once you knew, everything would change. You'd either resent me for hiding it or suddenly love me for having it, and either way, I'd never know if what we had was real. So you just, what, ran an experiment? Used our marriage as some kind of test? No, I said. I just wanted to be loved, without conditions, without asterisks, just loved. And Emily, I'm sorry, but you failed that test. The second you thought you could do better, the second you saw people with more money and decided I wasn't enough, that's when you failed. That's not fair, isn't it? You filed for divorce. Well, Emily, you put me on speakerphone and humiliated me. Like you told your friends I was mediocre and inadequate and that you deserve better. You didn't fail because you didn't know about my money. You failed because knowing about it would have changed how you felt about me. That's the problem. That's always been the problem. She was crying now, and I could hear it in her breathing. I loved you, she said. I did. I know you don't believe me, but I did. I believe you loved who you thought I was, I said. I just don't think that person actually existed. He was a character I played because I was afraid of being hurt. And you fell in love with the character instead of the person underneath. So when you started finding the character disappointing, there was nothing left. What does that mean for us? It means we sign the settlement agreement. You take the 200,000, you keep your car, and whatever else your father bought you. You move out of the house, my house, within 90 days, and we both move on with our lives. I don't want to move on, she said. That stopped me. What? I don't want to move on. I want, she took a shaky breath. I want to try again, now that I know everything. Now that there are no secrets, I want to try to make this work. Of all the things I'd prepared myself for, this wasn't one of them. Emily, think about it, David, please. We loved each other once. We can love each other again. And this time, without any secrets, without any misunderstandings, we could actually build something real. We had something real, I said quietly, and you threw it away the second you thought you could trade up. That doesn't just go away because you found out I have money. I made a mistake. You made a choice, a deliberate, public, cruel choice. You humiliated me to entertain your friends. You ended our marriage as a performance. And now that you know I'm actually wealthy, suddenly you want to try again? Emily, do you hear yourself? Do you hear what you're saying? I'm saying I love you. You love my money. Or you love the idea of not looking foolish for divorcing someone rich. But you don't love me, Emily. You never did. You love the fantasy of who you wanted me to be. And when I didn't match that fantasy, you left. The money doesn't change any of that. You're wrong. Am I? Answer me this. If I'd been honest from the beginning, if I'd shown up to our first date in a Ferrari and told you I was worth $15 million, would you have loved me more? She didn't answer. Would you have? I pressed. I don't know, she said finally. No, maybe, probably. Is that what you want to hear? That yes, knowing you had money would have made me love you differently? Fine, yeah, it would have. Money matters, David. It matters to everyone, even if they pretend it doesn't. It matters to you, I said. It doesn't matter to everyone, and that's the difference between us. I wanted someone who would love me when they thought I had nothing. You wanted someone you could brag about at the country club. We wanted different things. We still want different things. Please, she said, and she was fully crying now. Please don't do this. Don't end us because of pride or I'm not ending us. You already did that. I'm just accepting it. Finally, completely. Emily, I loved you. I really did. But the woman I loved wouldn't have put me on speakerphone to mock me, wouldn't have made our divorce into entertainment, wouldn't have called me mediocre and adequate, and all those other casually cruel things. The woman I loved doesn't exist anymore, and I'm not interested in trying to resurrect her. I can change, she said desperately. I can be better. You shouldn't have to change who you fundamentally are to be with me, and I shouldn't have to pretend to be less than I am to keep you. That's not a marriage, Emily. That's a performance. And I'm tired of performing. Silence, long and heavy. So that's it? She finally asked. We're just done? We've been done for a while, I said gently. This is just making it official. I hate this. I know. I hate you. I know that too. $200,000, she said, and her voice had gone flat. That's really all you're offering? That's 3 times what you're legally entitled to. If you want to reject it and go to court, that's your choice. But Emily, you're going to lose. Your lawyers know you're going to lose. The only question is whether you lose now with $200,000 or you lose later after spending 6 months and $50,000 in legal fees to end up with the same settlement or worse. My father will pay my legal fees. I'm sure he will. But is it worth it? 6 months of fighting and legal battles and public humiliation just to prove a point? Or would you rather take the money, move on, and start rebuilding your life? She was quiet for so long I thought she might have hung up. I'll talk to my lawyer, she finally said, and that's all I'm asking. David? Yeah? Did you ever really love me, or was this whole thing just an experiment to you? I looked out at the Phoenix skyline, at the city lights beginning to glow as the sun set. I loved you more than I've ever loved anyone, I said honestly. That's why this hurts so much. Not because you're taking my money or fighting the divorce or any of that, but because you made me feel small. You made me feel like I wasn't enough. And I let you do it because I was afraid that if I told you the truth, you'd only love me for the wrong reasons. Turns out I was right. That's not, it is though. Emily, the second you found out I had money, you wanted to try again. That tells me everything I need to know. If I'd been actually poor, if there was no secret fortune, if I really was just a mediocre accountant with a Honda, would you still want to work on this marriage? She didn't answer. That's what I thought, I said. Take the settlement. Move on. Be happy. Just do it without me. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking again. My chest felt tight. But underneath all of that, I felt something else, relief, because it was really, truly over. Not just the legal logistics of divorce, but the emotional limbo I'd been living in for 2 years, the constant wondering if Emily would wake up and remember who she'd married, the hope that maybe, somehow, we could find our way back to what we'd had in the beginning. That hope was dead now, and I was okay with that. My phone buzzed. A text from Robert. Did you just talk to Emily? How did you know? Her lawyer just called me screaming about you trying to negotiate directly with their client. Told them you two are still married and can talk if you want. They're pissed. She called me, I texted back. Wanted to try again. Wait, what? Found out I'm rich. Suddenly wants to make it work. I said no, good call. That would have been a disaster. I know. Her lawyer says they're rejecting our settlement offer. Want to proceed to discovery. I stared at that message. Discovery meant depositions, document requests, invasive questions about every financial transaction I'd made in 10 years. It meant months of legal warfare and tens of thousands in legal fees. For a settlement they were going to end up accepting anyway. Let them, I texted back. If they want to waste time and money on a case they can't win, that's their problem. You sure discovery's going to be invasive? They'll dig into everything. Let them dig. I've got nothing to hide. Every transaction is documented. Every property purchase is legal. Every investment is on the books. The only thing they're going to find is proof that I'm exactly who I said I am. All right, I'll file our response tomorrow. Get ready for the long haul. Already ready. I set my phone down, Ordered dinner, Indian food this time, from a place I'd never been because Emily didn't like curry. Ate it while watching the sunset from windows that were mine, in a condo that was mine, in a life that was finally, completely, honestly mine. The next 3 weeks were a blur of legal procedures and mounting evidence of Emily's increasingly desperate attempts to build a case against me. Her lawyers filed motion after motion, each one claiming some new theory about why my premarital assets should be considered community property, each one more creative and less legally sound than the last. Motion to compel me to provide tax returns for the past 15 years. Granted, because I had nothing to hide. Motion to depose my accountant. Granted. My accountant showed up, confirmed everything was legal and proper, and Emily's lawyers spent 3 hours failing to find any evidence of wrongdoing. Motion to depose Robert. Granted. Robert cheerfully explained the legal structure of my assets and provided documentation showing everything was established before my marriage, and motion to subpoena my bank records. Granted. The records showed exactly what I'd said they would. Clear separation between my premarital assets and our marital finances. Each motion cost Emily's side money. Each deposition yielded nothing useful. Each fishing expedition came up empty. And through it all, my settlement offer stood. $200,000 and 90 days to vacate. By week 3, even James Whitmore's lawyers were getting tired. I got a call from Robert on a Thursday afternoon. "You're not going to believe this." "Try me," I said, looking up from my laptop where I was reviewing rental applications for my Tempe duplex. "Emily's lawyers want to meet, in person, off the record." "Why?" "Because they're finally figuring out they have no case. They've spent 3 weeks in discovery finding absolutely nothing that helps them. Every document supports your story. Every witness confirms you kept everything separate. They're bleeding billable hours with nothing to show for it. So they want to settle. They want to talk about settling. There's a difference. My guess? They'll ask us to come up on our offer, play the sympathy card, try to negotiate something closer to $500,000. What do you think we should do?" "I think," Robert said carefully, "that you should consider lowering your offer." "What?" "Hear me out. They're panicking. They're realizing they can't win. And when lawyers panic, they start making bad decisions, like advising their clients to reject reasonable settlements in favor of continuing to fight unwinnable battles. If we lower our offer right now, it sends a message. We're not desperate. We're not worried. And we're certainly not going to reward their bad behavior with a higher settlement." "How much lower?" "Back to the original $75,000 that Arizona law requires. Plus, she keeps her car. But the 90-day grace period? Gone. She gets the legal minimum, 30 days to vacate." I thought about it, about Emily crying on the phone, about her wanting to try again, about 4 years of marriage that had ended badly and could end even worse. "Do it," I said. "But Robert?" "Yeah?" "Make sure they understand this is the final offer. If they reject this one, we're going to court and she gets whatever the judge decides, which might be even less." "You sure? This is going to seem harsh." "They rejected a generous offer because they thought they could shake me down for millions. They've spent 3 weeks trying to prove I'm a fraud, and they've dragged my accountant and my lawyer and my entire financial history through depositions looking for something, anything they could use against me. And they found nothing, so yes, I'm sure. They want to play hardball? Let's play hardball." Robert was quiet for a moment. "You've changed since this started, have I? You're harder, more decisive, less willing to accommodate." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I'm just tired of accommodating people who don't appreciate it. My whole marriage was me accommodating Emily's feelings and assumptions and needs. I'm done with that. She wants a fight? She gets a fight. She wants to settle? She settles on my terms. Either way, I'm not bending anymore." "Fair enough," Robert said. "I'll send over the revised offer tomorrow. And David?" "Yeah? For what it's worth? I think you're handling this exactly right." We hung up. I went back to reviewing rental applications. Life, as it turned out, continued regardless of legal drama. The revised settlement offer hit Emily's lawyer's desk on Friday morning. By Friday afternoon, all hell broke loose. I got 6 phone calls from Emily in the span of 20 minutes. I didn't answer any of them. She left voicemails that progressed from angry to desperate to something that might have been genuine regret. James Whitmore called 3 times. I didn't answer those either. And then at 4:47 p.m., I got a call from Robert. They accepted, he said. I sat up. What? They accepted? Just got the signed settlement agreement. Emily gets 75,000, keeps her car, has to be out of the house in 30 days. It's done, David. You're officially getting divorced on your terms. I should have felt victorious or relieved or something definitively positive. Instead, I felt hollow. That fast? I asked. That fast. Turns out when you're facing $0 and a humiliating trial versus 75,000 and a clean exit, even the most stubborn clients eventually see reason. Emily's lawyers probably told her that continuing to fight was professional malpractice. At this point, what happens now? Now we file the final paperwork. There's a 60-day cooling off period mandated by Arizona law. After that, the divorce is final. You're free. She's out of your house. And you get to move on with your life. 60 days. 60 days. I looked around my downtown condo, at the life I'd built in 3 weeks of exile, and at the space that was starting to feel like home instead of a temporary refuge. Thanks, Robert, I said, for everything. That's what friends are for. Now go do something fun. You've earned it. I hung up and sat in silence for a long time. My marriage was over, officially, legally, completely over. Emily would have her settlement. I would have my freedom. And in 60 days, we would both be single again, moving through the world separately, rebuilding lives that no longer included each other. It should have felt like an ending. Instead, it felt like an intermission, because I absolutely knew, that Emily wasn't done yet. The settlement was just the opening act. The real drama was still to come. And I was right. The call came at 6:23 a.m. on a Saturday morning, exactly 1 week after the settlement was signed. James Whitmore's voice tight with a rage I'd never heard before. The house, he said. Dear God, what did you do to the house? I sat up in bed, confused and still half asleep. What are you talking about? The house, David. Emily went to pack her things and... He stopped. I could hear him breathing hard, struggling for control. What did you do? James, I genuinely have no idea what you're talking about. What's wrong with the house? Everything, he said. Everything is wrong. You need to get over here. Now. And that's when I knew. Emily had finally really looked, at the house she'd been living in for 4 years. And she'd finally seen the truth. Part 5, the reveal. I took my time driving to Scottsdale, not because I was being petty, though maybe there was a little bit of that, but because I wanted James Whitmore to stew in whatever he thought he'd discovered. I wanted the panic to set in fully before I arrived to explain. The morning was beautiful. Phoenix in November is about as perfect as weather gets, all blue skies and 72 degrees and the mountains sharp against the horizon. I stopped at a coffee shop and ordered an espresso, sipped it slowly while sitting outside, watched people walk their dogs and jog past and live their normal Saturday morning lives while mine prepared to detonate for the second time in a month. When I finally pulled up to the house, my house, the house Emily had thought we'd been renting for 4 years, there were 3 cars in the driveway, Emily's BMW, James Whitmore's Range Rover, and a silver Mercedes I didn't recognize but assumed belonged to Emily's mother. The whole family was here for the show. I sat in my car for a moment finishing my coffee, then I got out, walked up the driveway I'd paid for, and knocked on the door of the house I owned. James answered. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in the past week. His face was gray, his eyes were wild, and his expensive suit looked like he'd slept in it. David, he said, get in here. I walked into my own house, the house where I'd lived for 4 years of marriage, the house where I'd cooked dinner and watched TV and made love and slowly watched my relationship crumble. It looked the same. Same furniture, same paint colors Emily had spent 3 weeks choosing. Same photos on the walls, though I noticed several had been taken down, leaving rectangular shadows on the paint. Emily was standing in the living room with her mother. She looked smaller than I remembered, diminished. Her eyes were red from crying, and she wouldn't meet my gaze. Emily says you own this house, James said without preamble. She says your lawyer told her lawyer you own it. Is that true? Yes, I said simply. Since when? Since 2018. I bought it 2 years before I met Emily. Patricia Whitmore, Emily's mother, made a small sound of disbelief. But you've been paying rent. Emily showed me the rental agreement. I've been paying rent into an account I control, I said. The rental agreement was between me and an LLC I own. It was easier than explaining. Easier than explaining? James's voice went up an octave. You've been living in your own house and charging yourself rent, and you thought that was easier than just being honest? I thought, I said carefully, that it was easier than having Emily know I owned a $750,000 house outright. Because if she knew that, she'd ask questions, and I wasn't ready to answer those questions. Why the hell not? Because I wanted to know if she loved me, I said quietly. Not the things I owned, me. And the only way to know that was to not tell her about the things I owned. Emily finally looked at me. Her eyes were devastated. You let me live here for 4 years thinking we were barely getting by. Do you know how many times I looked at houses online? How many times I fantasized about what we could afford someday if you would just be more ambitious? And the whole time, we were living in your house. Your house, David. Yes. That's insane. You know that's insane, right? Maybe, I acknowledged. But it worked. I found out exactly who you were and what you valued. Mission accomplished. This is the revenge, Patricia said suddenly. This is what you've been planning, making us all look foolish. Oh, I said, turning to her. If I wanted revenge, I would have told you all at a family dinner, would have invited all Emily's country club friends, would have made it a performance, the way she made our divorce a performance. This? I gestured around the house. This was just me living my life. You're the ones who assumed I was poor. I never said I was. You never said you weren't, Emily shouted. I didn't think I had to, I said. Emily, in the beginning, you told me you didn't care about money. You said love was more important than wealth. You said we'd build our life together, and that was what mattered. Remember? That was before what? Before your father got rich? Before you started comparing our life to your friends' lives? Before you decided I wasn't good enough? I shook my head. Nothing changed except your priorities. I've always been exactly who I am. You just stopped appreciating it once you had something to compare it to. James stepped forward. David, I need you to tell me the truth. All of it. How much are you actually worth? I looked at him. At this man who'd spent 4 years treating me like I was beneath his family. Who'd investigated me and found me acceptably mediocre. Who'd compared me to his employees and found me adequate as middle-class stock. James, I said slowly, do you really want to know? Because once I tell you, you're going to have to live with the knowledge that you treated me like garbage for 4 years while I was actually. How much? Approximately $15 million, I said calmly. Give or take, depending on the market. The house you're standing in is worth about $850,000 now, up from the $680,000 I paid for it. I also own a condo downtown, a duplex in Tempe, a commercial property in Mesa, and a vacation rental in Sedona. Combined property value, around $3.4 million. The rest is in investment portfolios, bonds, and a few private equity positions. Patricia sat down heavily on the couch. Emily's face had gone completely white. $15 million, James repeated, like he was testing the words. $15 million. Yes. From what? I sold a software company in 2018. Streamline Analytics, got $18.3 million for it. Invested wisely. Bought property at the right time. Lived carefully. The money grew. I never heard of that company, James said suspiciously. Most people haven't. It was B2B software. Supply chain optimization, not sexy, but profitable. The company that bought it integrated the tech into their existing platform. It doesn't exist as a separate entity anymore. I had you investigated, James said, and there was something like horror in his voice. When Emily said she was going to marry you, I had a private investigator run a full background check. They found nothing, no company, no sale, no money. Because I set everything up through trusts and LLCs, I said. The sale went through a Delaware corporation I established specifically for that purpose. The money was distributed to various holding companies, and my name isn't on anything obvious. You'd have to know what you were looking for to find it, and your investigator was looking for red flags. Criminal records, debt, infidelity, not invisible wealth. That's deceptive, Patricia said. That's private, I corrected. There's a difference. I structured my finances for tax efficiency and asset protection. It's what rich people do. You should know that, James. I'm sure your real estate holdings are spread across multiple entities, too. He didn't respond, which was answer enough. Emily was staring at me like I was a stranger. Who are you? I'm the same person I've always been, I just have money you didn't know about. That's not, she stopped, started again. You're not the person I married. Yes, I am. I'm exactly the person you married. You just built a different story about who that person was based on his car and his Costco membership. That's not my fault, Emily. That's yours. You lied. I never lied. Point to one thing I said that was factually untrue. She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at her father for support. You said you worked as an accountant, James said. I do work as an accountant. I have my CPA license. I manage my own assets and occasionally consult for friends. That's accounting work. You said you lived modestly. I do live modestly. My car costs $32,000. I shop at Costco, I cook at home. Just because I can afford more doesn't mean I want more. Modest is a choice, not a circumstance. You let us think you were struggling, Patricia said. No, I let you assume I was struggling. There's a difference. I never complained about money. I never asked your family for help. I never pretended I couldn't afford things. I just didn't buy expensive things. And you interpreted that as inability rather than choice. This is sophistry, James said. You're playing word games. I'm being precise, I said, because precision matters. You're all acting like I committed some kind of fraud, but I didn't. I lived my life. I made my choices, and you made assumptions. Wrong assumptions. That's not on me. Emily's voice was small when she spoke. Why, David? Why did you hide this? I looked at her. Really looked at her. At the woman I'd loved. At the stranger she'd become. Because 4 years ago, I met a woman at a barbecue, I said quietly. She was smart and funny and ambitious. She worked in marketing. She drove a used Nissan. She was excited about her life and her career and her future, and when I asked her out, she said yes. Not because of what I drove or where I lived or how much I made, just because she liked me. Emily's eyes filled with tears. And I fell in love with that woman, I continued. The one who said money didn't matter. The one who said we'd build our life together. The one who picked out paint colors and cooked dinner with me and seemed genuinely happy with our supposedly mediocre life. I fell in love with her so hard that I wanted to protect what we had. I wanted to make sure it was real. By lying to me, by not corrupting it with money. Emily, I've seen what wealth does to people. I've seen relationships implode because one person had more than the other. I've seen families torn apart over inheritance. I've seen women marry men they didn't love because the bank account was attractive enough. I didn't want that. I wanted authenticity. I wanted to know that you loved me for me. But you didn't trust me, she said. No, I admitted, and I didn't. And maybe that was unfair. Maybe I should have told you on our second date or our 10th date or before I proposed. Maybe I should have trusted that you'd love me the same regardless of the money. But Emily, I'd watched you change. After your father's business took off, after you started spending time at the country club, after you met all those women who measured worth in square footage and handbag brands, I watched you transform. You started comparing, judging, finding me insufficient. And I knew that if I told you the truth, then it would only make things worse. How could it make things worse? Because then you'd resent me for hiding it instead of resenting me for not having it. Either way, I lost you. At least this way, I knew why. Patricia stood up. This is ridiculous. James, we should go. This is between them. No, James said. I want to understand this. David, you've spent 4 years making my family look like fools. You've let me treat you like... He stopped, something like shame crossing his face. Like what? I asked. Like someone beneath you? Like middle-class stock? Like an employee you were grudgingly accepting into the family? His silence was confirmation. I let you treat me that way, I said, because I wanted to see who you really were. All of you. Without money clouding the picture. And you know what I learned? That your family only respects wealth. That character and integrity and basic human decency don't matter if you're not rich enough. That Emily learned from you, James. That money is the same as worth. And that's a really sad way to live. Don't you dare lecture me about... I'm not lecturing, I'm explaining. You asked me why I hid my wealth. That's why. Because people like you only see the wealth. You don't see the person. And I wanted just once in my life to be seen for who I actually was, instead of what I could buy. And how did that work out for you? Emily asked bitterly. Badly, I admitted. I lost my marriage. I lost 4 years to a relationship that was built on false premises. I lost the woman I loved because I was too afraid to be vulnerable about money. So yeah, Emily, it worked out badly, but at least I know. At least I'm not spending the rest of my life wondering if you loved me or my bank account. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Emily, I said more gently, if I had told you the truth in the beginning, would you have loved me the same way? I don't know, she whispered. Yes, you do. You'd have loved me more, or loved me differently, or loved the idea of me more than the reality. And I'd have spent every day wondering if it was real. At least this way, I know those first 12 months were real. Before your father's money changed everything. Before the country club and the comparisons and the disappointment. We had something real then, didn't we? She was crying openly now. We did. Then that's what I wanted to protect. That's why I hid everything. Not to deceive you, not to make you look foolish, just to protect something real for as long as I could. But it wasn't real, she said. It was based on a lie. It was based on an omission. And maybe that's the same thing. Maybe I'm just as guilty as you think I am. But Emily, you need to understand something. The house didn't matter. The money didn't matter. What mattered was that somewhere along the way, you stopped loving me. Not because of what I had or didn't have, but because I wasn't impressive enough. I didn't make your friends jealous. I didn't give you bragging rights. I was just David. And that stopped being enough. That's not true. Isn't it? You filed for divorce before you knew about the money. You humiliated me at the country club before you knew about the money. You called me mediocre and inadequate and said I couldn't give you the life you deserved, all before you knew about the money. The money didn't end our marriage, Emily. You did. I just didn't fight it because I was tired of being found insufficient. Patricia moved toward her daughter, putting an arm around her shoulders. We should leave. This isn't productive. No, Emily said, wiping her eyes. I need to understand. David, if you really loved me, why didn't you fight for us? Why did you just let me go? Because you didn't want me, I said simply. You wanted someone more impressive, someone your friends would be jealous of, someone who would make your father proud. I'm none of those things, Emily. I'm just a guy who happens to have money. And if that's all it takes to make you happy, then we were never going to work anyway. But we could have. No, I interrupted. Like, we couldn't have. Because the second you found out about the money, everything would have changed. You'd have been happy about the wrong things. You'd have loved me for the wrong reasons. And I'd have spent the rest of our marriage wondering if you'd have stayed if I'd been actually poor. I'd rather be alone than spend my life wondering that. James cleared his throat. David, I owe you an apology. That surprised me. I turned to look at him. I treated you poorly, he continued, and the words seemed to cost him. I made assumptions about who you were based on what I thought you had. I compared you to my own success and found you wanting. That was wrong of me. I should have judged you by your character, not your bank account. But you didn't know how to do that, I said. Because to you, bank accounts are character. Wealth is virtue. Success is morality. That's how you've lived your whole life, James. I'm not saying that to be cruel. I'm saying it because it's true. And Emily learned it from you. He nodded slowly. Perhaps she did. I don't need your apology, I said. What I needed was for your daughter to love me regardless of money. She couldn't do that. And that's not your fault, but it's not mine either. It just is. Emily looked around the living room, at the house she'd lived in for 4 years. How much of this was real? The furniture, the dishes? Did you own all of this before we met? Most of it, I said. I bought the house furnished, added some things. You picked out some new items. The bedroom set, the dining table. Those were real choices we made together, but the foundation, the structure, the house itself, yeah, that was always mine. I picked out paint colors for your house. Our house, I corrected. While we were married, it was our house. I just owned it. That's insane. Maybe, but Emily, would you have been happy here if you'd known I owned it? Would you have picked out the same paint colors? Would you have been as excited about making it a home? Or would you have wanted something bigger? Something more impressive? Something that signaled wealth instead of just being comfortable? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. You would have wanted more, I said. Because once you knew I could afford more, the adequate would have become inadequate. The comfortable would have become disappointing. That's what money does. It changes the goalpost. And I didn't want to live on a constantly moving goalpost. I wanted to live in a house that felt like home. This place, she said, looking around with something like grief. I actually loved this place when I thought we were renting it. When I thought it was all we could afford, I loved it because it was ours. But now it's tainted, I finished. Because now you know I could have given you something bigger, something better, something more worthy of the life you think you deserve. Yes, she whispered. That's exactly why I didn't tell you. Patricia checked her watch. James, we really should go. Emily can pack her things later. This conversation isn't helping anyone. Actually, I said, there's one more thing you should know. 3 sets of eyes turned to me. The settlement Emily signed, I said. The $75,000. That's more than she's legally entitled to. Arizona law would have given her maybe $50,000 at most. I offered extra because, despite everything, I don't want to see her struggle. But I want you all to understand something. I'm not offering that money out of guilt. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm offering it because I'm trying to be a good person even though this situation is garbage. How magnanimous, Emily said bitterly. Not magnanimous, decent. There's a difference. Magnanimous would be giving you what your lawyers originally asked for. Decent is giving you enough to start over without destroying myself in the process. I'm being decent, Emily. I wish you'd been decent to me. I was decent to you for 4 years. You were convenient to me for 3 years and cruel to me for 1, I corrected. There's a difference. She started to respond, but James put a hand on her shoulder. Emily, let's go. This isn't accomplishing anything. But the house is his house, was always his house. We'll find you something else, something better. He looked at me. She has 30 days to vacate per the settlement agreement. Yes, that's not much time. It's the legal minimum. I was going to give her 90 days, but she rejected that settlement offer. She wanted to fight, so she gets the minimum. This is punishment, Patricia said. No, this is consequences. She made choices. Those choices have outcomes. Welcome to adult life. Emily's face crumpled. I hate you so much right now. I know, I said tiredly. But Emily, I really hope someday you don't. I hope someday you look back on this and understand that I loved you. I really did, Mud. I just loved myself enough not to let you keep hurting me. And I hope you find someone who makes you happy. Someone who checks all the boxes your father taught you to value. Someone impressive and wealthy and worthy of your country club friends' jealousy. I genuinely hope you find that person and live a wonderful life. You're being condescending. I'm being honest. There's someone out there who will love you the way you want to be loved. I'm just not that person, not anymore. James guided Emily toward the door. Patricia followed. They looked smaller somehow, less formidable than when they'd arrived. The righteous anger had drained out of them, leaving only confusion and something that might have been embarrassment. At the door, James turned back. David, one last question. Yes? Why did you agree to live this way? The rental agreement, the modest lifestyle, all of it. You could have lived anywhere, done anything. Why this? I looked around the house one last time, at the space I'd carefully curated to seem like just enough, at the life I'd built to test a theory about love. Because I was lonely, I said simply. I had money, but I didn't have people. I had success, but I didn't have connection, and I thought maybe if I stripped away everything that made me impressive on paper, I could find something real, someone real. I thought maybe Emily was that person. And now? Now I know she wasn't. And that's okay. Better to know than to wonder. He nodded once. Then they were gone, loading into their expensive cars, driving away from my house, leaving me alone in the space that had hosted 4 years of marriage and lies of omission and carefully maintained performances. I stood in the living room for a long time after they left. The house felt different now, emptier, like whatever life it had held had been sucked out with Emily's departure. I walked through the room slowly. The kitchen where we'd cooked together, the bedroom where we'd slept together, the office where I'd worked while pretending to be a struggling consultant. Every space was haunted by memories of who we'd been and who we'd pretended to be. My phone buzzed. A text from Robert. Heard Emily's family showed up at the house. You okay? Fine, I texted back. They know everything now. And they're horrified, offended, confused, all the things I expected. How do you feel? I sat down on the couch Emily and I had picked out together at a furniture store in Tempe. She'd been so happy that day, laughing and testing cushions, talking about our future in this house she thought we were renting. Empty, I texted, but also free. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. Want to get dinner later? You shouldn't be alone right now. Actually, I think I want to be alone. Just for tonight. Tomorrow we can celebrate or commiserate or whatever this feeling is. Understood. Call if you need anything. Thanks, Robert. I set my phone down and sat in the silence. Somewhere in Phoenix, Emily was probably crying to her parents about my deception, about how I'd tricked her and lied to her and made her look foolish. She was probably already rewriting the story of our marriage into something that made her the victim and me the villain. And maybe I was the villain. Maybe keeping that secret for 4 years was unforgivable. Maybe I'd destroyed our marriage with my paranoia and my fear and my inability to just trust that I was lovable with or without money. Or maybe we'd destroyed it together. Her with her comparisons and her disappointment. Me with my secrets and my tests. Both of us failing to actually see each other, too busy playing parts to recognize that we were performing for an audience of two. I didn't know. What I did know was this. I was sitting in my own house, finally, without pretense. I was worth $15 million, finally, without hiding it. I was David Chen, software engineer, turned real estate investor, turned cautionary tale about the corrosive nature of secrets. And I was alone, but alone, I was learning, wasn't the same as lonely. I pulled out my phone and started making a list. Things I'd put off while playing the role of adequate husband. Things I'd wanted to do but couldn't because they didn't fit the character. Travel to Japan. I'd always wanted to visit Tokyo and Kyoto, but Emily had never been interested, and I'd told myself it was too expensive anyway. Learn to fly helicopters. Ridiculous? Yes. Expensive? Very. Something I'd been secretly interested in for years? Absolutely. Angel invest in some of the startups my former colleagues were building. I'd been passive with my wealth for too long, letting it sit in index funds and real estate. Maybe it was time to actively try to build something again. Start dating again. Eventually. When I was ready, when I'd figured out how to be honest about money without being defined by it, the list grew longer. The evening grew darker. And slowly, in the quiet of my own house, I started to feel something that wasn't quite happiness, but wasn't quite sadness either. It was possibility. The door to my old life had closed. The door to whatever came next was just beginning to open, and for the first time in 4 years, I wasn't pretending about what was on the other side.